This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Susie G. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius, Manlius, Severinus, Boethius. Translated by H.R. James. Book 4, Section 3 and Song 3, Kirky's Cup. Thou seest, then, in what foulness unrighteous deeds are sunk, with what splendor righteousness shines, whereby it is manifest that goodness never lacks its reward, nor crime its punishment. For, verily, in all manner of transactions, that for the sake of which the particular action is done, may justly be accounted the reward of that action, even as the wreath, for the sake of which the race is won, is the reward offered for running. Now, we have shown happiness to be that very good, for the sake of which all things are done. Absolute good, then, is offered as the common prize, as it were, of all human actions. But, truly, this is a reward from which it is impossible to separate the good man, for one who is without good cannot properly be called good at all, wherefore righteous dealing never misses its target. Rage the wicked, then, never so violently. The crown shall not fall from the head of the wise, nor wither. Verily, other men's unrighteousness cannot pluck from righteous souls their proper glory. Were the reward, in which the soul of the righteous delighteth, received from without, then might it be taken away by him who gave it, or some other. But since it is conferred by his own righteousness, then only will he lose his prize when he has ceased to be righteous. Lastly, since every prize is desired because it is believed to be good, who can account him who possesses good to be without reward? And what a prize, the fairest and grandest of all! For remember the corollary which I chiefly insisted on a little while back, and reason thus. Since absolute good is happiness, 'tis clear that all the good must be happy for the very reason that they are good. But it was agreed that those who are happy are gods. So, then, the prize of the good is one which no time may impair, no man's power lessen, no man's unrighteousness tarnish. 'Tis very godship. And this being so, the wise men cannot doubt that punishment is inseparable from the bad. For since good and bad, and likewise reward and punishment, are contraries, it necessarily follows that, corresponding to all that we see accrue as reward of the good, there is some penalty attached as punishment of evil. As, then, righteousness itself is the reward of the righteous, so wickedness itself is the punishment of the unrighteous. Now, no one who is visited with punishment doubts that he is visited with evil. Accordingly, if they were but willing to weigh their own case, could they think themselves free from punishment whom wickedness, worst of all evils, has not only touched, but deeply tainted? See also from the opposite standpoint, the standpoint of the good, what a penalty attends upon the wicked. Thou didst learn a little, since that whatever is one, and that unity itself is good. Accordingly, by this way of reckoning, whatever falls away from goodness ceases to be, whence it comes to pass that the bad cease to be what they were, while only the outward aspect is still left to show they have been men. Wherefore, by their perversion to badness, they have lost their true human nature. Further, since righteousness alone can raise men above the level of humanity, it must needs be that unrighteousness degrades below man's level those whom it has cast out of man's estate. It results, then, that thou canst not consider him human whom thou seest transformed by vice. The violent despoiler of other men's goods, inflamed with covetousness, surely resembles a wolf. A bold and restless spirit, ever wrangling in law courts, is like some yelping cur. The secret schemer, taking pleasure in fraud and stealth, is own brother to the fox. The passionate man, frenzied with rage, we might believe to be animated with the soul of a lion. The coward and runaway, afraid where no fear is, may be likened to the timid deer. He who is sunk in ignorance and stupidity lives like a dull ass. He who is light and inconstant, never holding long to one thing, is for all the world like a bird. He who wallows in foul and unclean lusts is sunk in the pleasures of a filthy hog. So it comes to pass that he who by forsaking righteousness ceases to be a man cannot pass into a godlike condition, but actually turns into a brute beast. Song 3. Kirky's Cup. The Ithacan discreet, and all his storm-tossed fleet, far over the ocean wave the winds of heaven drave to the mystic isle, where dwelleth in her guile that fair and faithless one, the daughter of the sun. There for the stranger crew with cunning spells she knew to mix the enchanted cup, for whoso drinks it up must suffer hideous change to monstrous shapes and strange. One like a boar appears, this his huge form uprears, mighty in bulk and limb, an Afric lion, grim with claw and fang. Confessed a wolf, this, sore distressed when he would weep, doth howl, and, strangely tame, these prowl the Indian tiger's mates. And though in such sore straits the pity of the god who bears the mystic rod had power the chieftain brave from her fell arts to save, his comrades, unrestrained, the fatal goblet drained. All now with low bent head, like swine on acorns fed. Man's speech and form were reft, no human feature left, but steadfast still, the mind, unaltered, unresigned, the monstrous change bewailed. How little, then, availed the potencies of ill, these herbs, this baneful skill, may change each outward part, but cannot touch the heart. In its true home, deep set, man's spirit liveth yet. Those poisons are more fell, more potent to expel man from his high estate, with subtlety penetrate, and leave the body whole, but deep infect the soul. End of Book 4, Section 3, and Song 3, Kirky's Cup.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Corey Samuel. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius Manlius Severinus Boethius. Translated by H.R. James. Book 4, Good and Ill Fortune. Section 4 and Song 4. The unreasonableness of hatred. Then said I, this is very true. I see that the vicious, though they keep the outward form of man, are rightly said to be changed into beasts in respect of their spiritual nature. But, inasmuch as their cruel and polluted minds vent their rage in the destruction of the good, I would this license were not permitted to them. Nor is it, said she, as shall be shown in the fitting place. Yet if that license which thou believest to be permitted to them were taken away, the punishment of the wicked would be in great part remitted. For verily, incredible as it may seem to some, it needs must be that the bad are more unfortunate when they have accomplished their desires, than if they are unable to get them fulfilled. If it is wretched to will evil, to have been able to accomplish evil is more wretched, for without the power the wretched will would fail of effect. Accordingly, those whom thou seest to will, to be able to accomplish, and to accomplish crime, must needs be the victims of a threefold wretchedness, since each one of these states has its own measure of wretchedness. Yes, said I, yet I earnestly wish they might speedily be quit of this misfortune by losing the ability to accomplish crime. They will lose it, said she, sooner than perchance thou wishest, or they themselves think likely, since verily within the narrow bounds of our brief life there is nothing so late in coming that any one, least of all an immortal spirit, should deem it long to wait for. Their great expectations, the lofty fabric of their crimes, is oft overthrown by a sudden and unlooked for ending, and this but sets a limit to their misery. For if wickedness makes men wretched, he is necessarily more wretched who is wicked for a longer time, and were it not that death, at all events, puts an end to the evil doings of the wicked, I should account them wretched to the last degree. Indeed, if we have formed true conclusions about the ill fortune of wickedness, that wretchedness is plainly infinite, which is doomed to be eternal. Then said I, a wonderful inference, and difficult to grant, but I see that it agrees entirely with our previous conclusions. Thou art right, said she, but if any one finds it hard to admit the conclusion, he ought in fairness either to prove some falsity in the premises, or to show that the combination of propositions does not adequately enforce the necessity of the conclusion. Otherwise, if the premises be granted, nothing whatever can be said against the inference of the conclusion. And here is another statement which seems not less wonderful, but on the premises assumed is equally necessary. What is that? The wicked are happier in undergoing punishment than if no penalty of justice chasten them. And I am not now meaning what might occur to anyone, that bad character is amended by retribution, and is brought into the right path by the terror of punishment, or that it serves as an example to warn others to avoid transgression. But I believe that in another way the wicked are more unfortunate when they go unpunished, even though no account be taken of amendment, and no regard be paid to example. Why, what other way is there beside these? Said I. Then said she, have we not agreed that the good are happy, and the evil wretched? Yes, said I. Now if, said she, to one in affliction there be given along with his misery some good thing, is he not happier than one whose misery is misery pure and simple, without admixture of any good? It would seem so. But if to one thus wretched, one destitute of all good, some further evil be added besides those which make him wretched, is he not to be judged far more unhappy than he whose ill fortune is alleviated by some share of good? It could scarcely be otherwise. Surely, then, the wicked, when they are punished, have a good thing added to them, to wit, the punishment, which by the law of justice is good; and likewise, when they escape punishment, a new evil attaches to them in that very freedom from punishment which thou hast rightly acknowledged to be an evil in the case of the unrighteous. I cannot deny it. Then the wicked are far more unhappy when indulged with an unjust freedom from punishment than when punished by a just retribution. Now it is manifest that it is just for the wicked to be punished, and for them to escape unpunished is unjust. Why, who would venture to deny it? This too no one can possibly deny, that all which is just is good, and conversely all which is unjust is bad. Then I answered, these inferences do indeed follow from what we lately concluded, but tell me, said I, dost thou take no account of the punishment of the soul after the death of the body?" "Nay, truly," said she, "great are these penalties, some of them inflicted, I imagine, in the severity of retribution, others in the mercy of purification. But it is not my present purpose to speak of these. So far my aim hath been to make thee recognize that the power of the bad which shocked thee so exceedingly is no power, to make thee see that those of whose freedom from punishment thou didst complain are never without the proper penalties of their unrighteousness, to teach thee that the license which thou praidst might soon come to an end is not long enduring, that it would be more unhappy if it lasted longer, most unhappy of all if it lasted for ever. Thereafter, that the unrighteous are more wretched if unjustly let go without punishment, than if punished by a just retribution. From which point of view it follows that the wicked are afflicted with more severe penalties just when they are supposed to escape punishment." Then said I, "While I follow thy reasonings, I am deeply impressed with their truth. But if I turn to the common convictions of men, I find few who will even listen to such arguments, let alone admit them to be credible." "True," said she, "they cannot lift eyes accustomed to darkness to the light of clear truth, and are like those birds whose vision night illumines and day blinds. For while they regard, not the order of the universe, but their own dispositions of mind, they think the license to commit crime, and the escape from punishment, to be fortunate. But mark the ordinance of eternal law. Hast thou fashioned thy soul to the likeness of the better, thou hast no need of a judge to award the prize. By thine own act hast thou raised thyself in the scale of excellence. Hast thou perverted thy affections to baser things, look not for punishment from one without thee. Thine own act hath degraded thee, and thrust thee down. Even so, if alternately thou turn thy gaze upon the vile earth and upon the heavens, though all without thee stand still, by the mere laws of sight thou seemest now sunk in the mire, now soaring among the stars. But the common herd regards not these things. What then? Shall we go over to those whom we have shown to be like brute beasts? Why, suppose now one who had quite lost his sight should likewise forget that he had ever possessed the faculty of vision, and should imagine that nothing was wanting in him to human perfection. Should we deem those who saw as well as ever blind? Why, they will not even assent to this either, that they who do wrong are more wretched than those who suffer wrong, though the proof of this rests on grounds of reason no less strong. "Let me hear these same reasons," said I. "Wouldst thou deny that every wicked man deserves punishment?" "I would not, certainly." "And that those who are wicked are unhappy is clear in manifold ways?" "Yes," I replied. "Thou dost not doubt, then, that those who deserve punishment are wretched?" "Agreed," said I. "So then, if thou wert sitting in judgment, on whom wouldst thou decree the infliction of punishment? On him who had done the wrong, or on him who had suffered it?" "Without doubt, I would compensate the sufferer at the cost of the doer of the wrong." "Then the injurer would seem more wretched than the injured?" "Yes, it follows. And so for this and other reasons resting on the same ground, inasmuch as baseness of its own nature makes men wretched, it is plain that a wrong involves the misery of the doer, not of the sufferer." "And yet," says she, "the practice of the law courts is just the opposite. Advocates try to arouse the commiseration of the judges for those who have endured some grievous and cruel wrong, whereas pity is rather due to the criminal, who ought to be brought to the judgment seat by his accusers in a spirit not of anger, but of compassion and kindness, as a sick man to the physician, to have the ulcer of his fault cut away by punishment, whereby the business of the advocate would either wholly come to a standstill, or, did men prefer to make it serviceable to mankind, would be restricted to the practice of accusation. The wicked themselves also, if through some chink or cranny they were permitted to behold the virtue they have forsaken, and were to see that by the pains of punishment they would rid themselves of the uncleanness of their vices, and win in exchange the recompense of righteousness, they would no longer think these sufferings pains. They would refuse the help of advocates, and would commit themselves wholly into the hands of their accusers and judges. Whence it comes to pass that for the wise no place is left for hatred. Only the most foolish would hate the good, and to hate the bad is unreasonable. For if vicious propensity is, as it were, a disease of the soul like bodily sickness, even as we account the sick in body by no means deserving of hate, but rather of pity, so, and much more, should they be pitied whose minds are assailed by wickedness, which is more frightful than any sickness. Song 4. The unreasonableness of hatred. Why all this furious strife? Oh why, with rash and wilful hand, provoke death's destined day? If death ye seek, lo, death is nigh. Not of their masters will those coursers swift delay. The wild beasts vent on man their rage, yet 'gainst their brothers' lives men point the murderous steel. Unjust and cruel wars they wage, and haste with flying darts the death to meet or deal. No right nor reason can they show, 'tis but because their lands and laws are not the same. Wouldst thou give each his due, then know the love the good must have, the bad thy pity claim. End of Book 4. Good and Ill Fortune, Section 4, and Song 4, The Unreasonableness of Hatred.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius, Manlius, Severinus, Boethius, translated by H.R. James. Book 4, Good and Ill Fortune, Section 5 and Song 5, Wonder and Ignorance. Section 5. On this I said, I see how there is a happiness and misery founded on the actual deserts of the righteous and the wicked. Nevertheless, I wonder in myself whether there is not some good and evil in fortune as the vulgar understand it. Certainly, no sensible man would rather be exiled, poor and disgraced, than dwell prosperously in his own country, powerful, wealthy, and high in honour. Indeed, the work of wisdom is more clear and manifest in its operation when the happiness of rulers is somehow passed on to the people around them, especially considering that the prison, the law, and the other pains of legal punishment are properly due only to mischievous citizens on whose accounts they were originally instituted. Accordingly, I do exceedingly marvel why all this is completely reversed, why the good are harassed with the penalties due to crime, and the bad carry off the rewards of virtue. And I long to hear from thee what reason may be found for so unjust a state of disorder. For assuredly, I should wonder less if I could believe that all things are the confused result of chance. But now my belief in God's governance doth add amazement to amazement. For seeing that he sometimes assigns fair fortune to the good and harsh fortune to the bad, and then again deals harshly with the good and grants to the bad their heart's desire, how does this differ from chance, unless some reason is discovered for it all? Nay, it is not wonderful, said she, if all should be thought random and confused when the principle of order is not known. And though thou knowest not the causes on which this great system depends, yet forasmuch as a good ruler governs the world, doubt not for thy part that all is rightly done. Song 5. Wonder and Ignorance. Who knoweth not how near the pole Bootes' course doth go, must marvel by what heavenly law he moves his wain so slow, why late he plunges 'neath the main, and swiftly lights his beams again. When the full-orbed moon grows pale in the mid-course of night, and suddenly the stars shine forth that languished in her light, the 'stonished nations stand at gaze, and beat the air in wild amaze. None marvels why upon the shore the storm-lashed breakers beat, nor why the frost-bound glaciers melt at summer's fervent heat. For here the cause seems plain and clear, only what's dark and hid we fear. Weak-minded folly magnifies all that is rare and strange, and the dull herd's o'erwhelmed with awe at unexpected change. But wonder leaves enlightened minds when ignorance no longer blinds. End of section 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius, Manlius, Severinus, Boethius. Translated by H.R. James. Book 4. Good and Ill Fortune. Section 6 and Song 6. The Universal Aim. Section 6. True, said I, but since it is thy office to unfold the hidden cause of things, and explain principles veiled in darkness, inform me, I pray thee, of thine own conclusions in this matter, since the marvel of it is what more than aught else disturbs my mind. A smile played one moment upon her lips as she replied, Thou callest me to the greatest of all subjects of inquiry, a task for which the most exhaustive treatment barely suffices. Such is its nature that, as fast as one doubt is cut away, innumerable others spring up like Hydra's heads, nor could we set any limit to their renewal did we not apply the mind's living fire to suppress them. For there come within its scope the questions of the essential simplicity of Providence, of the order of fate, of unforeseen chance, of the divine knowledge and predestination, and of the freedom of the will. How heavy is the weight of all this thou canst judge for thyself. But, inasmuch as to know these things also is part of the treatment of thy malady, we will try to give them some consideration, despite the restrictions of the narrow limits of our time. Moreover, thou must for a time dispense with the pleasures of music and song, if so be that thou findest any delight therein, whilst I weave together the connected train of reasons in proper order. As thou wilt, said I. Then, as if making a new beginning, she thus discoursed. The coming into being of all things, the whole course of development in things that change, every sort of thing that moves in any wise, receives its due cause, order, and form from the steadfastness of the divine mind. This mind, calm in the citadel of its own essential simplicity, has decreed that the method of its rule shall be manifold. Viewed in the very purity of the divine intelligence, this method is called Providence. But viewed in regard to those things which it moves and disposes, it is what the ancients called Fate. That these two are different will easily be clear to anyone who passes in review their respective efficacies. Providence is the divine reason itself, seated in the Supreme Being, which disposes all things. Fate is the disposition inherent in all things which move, through which Providence joins all things in their proper order. Providence embraces all things, however different, however infinite. Fate sets in motion separately individual things, and assigns to them severally their position, form, and time. So the unfolding of this temporal order, unified into the foreview of the divine mind, is Providence, while the same unity, broken up and unfolded in time, is Fate. And although these are different, yet is there a dependence between them, for the order of destiny issues from the essential simplicity of Providence. For as the artificer, forming in his mind beforehand the idea of the thing to be made, carries out his design, and develops from moment to moment what he had before seen in a single instant as a whole, so God, in his providence, ordains all things as parts of a single, unchanging whole, but carries out these very ordinances by Fate in a time of manifold unity. So whether Fate is accomplished by divine spirits as the ministers of Providence, or by a soul, or by the service of all nature, whether by the celestial motion of the stars, by the efficacy of angels, or by the many-sided cunning of demons, whether by all or by some of these the destined series is woven, this at least is manifest, that Providence is the fixed and simple form of destined events, Fate their shifting series in order of time, as by the disposal of the divine simplicity they are to take place. Whereby it is that all things which are under Fate are subjected also to Providence, on which Fate itself is dependent. Whereas certain things which are set under Providence are above the chain of Fate, viz., those things which by their nearness to the primal divinity are steadfastly fixed, and lie outside the order of Fate's movements. For as the innermost of several circles revolving around the same centre approaches the simplicity of the midmost point, and is, as it were, a pivot around which the exterior circles turn, while the outermost, whirled in ampler orbit, takes in a wider and wider sweep of space in proportion to its departure from the indivisible unity of the centre, while, further, whatever joins and allies itself to the centre is narrowed to a like simplicity, and no longer expands vaguely into space, even so whatsoever departs widely from primal mind is involved more deeply in the meshes of Fate, and things are free from Fate in proportion as they seek to come nearer to that central pivot. While if aught cleaves close to supreme mind in its absolute fixity, this too, being free from movement, rises above Fate's necessity. Therefore, as is reasoning to pure intelligence, as that which is generated to that which is, time to eternity, a circle to its centre, so is the shifting series of Fate to the steadfastness and simplicity of Providence. It is this causal series which moves heaven and the stars, attempers the elements to mutual accord, and again in turn transforms them into new combinations. This, which renews the series of all things that are born and die through like successions of germ and birth. It is its operation which binds the destinies of men by an indissoluble nexus of causality, and, since it issues in the beginning from unalterable Providence, these destinies also must of necessity be immutable. Accordingly, the world is ruled for the best, if this unity, abiding in the divine mind, puts forth an inflexible order of causes, and this order, by its intrinsic immutability, restricts things mutable, which otherwise would ebb and flow at random, and so it happens that, although to you, who are not altogether capable of understanding this order, all things seem confused and disordered, nevertheless there is everywhere an appointed limit which guides all things to good. Verily, nothing can be done for the sake of evil, even by the wicked themselves, for, as we abundantly proved, they seek good, but are drawn out of the way by perverse error. Far less can this order, which sets out from the supreme centre of good, turn aside any whither from the way in which it began. Yet what confusion, thou wilt say, can be more unrighteous than that prosperity and adversity should indifferently befall the good, what they like and what they loathe come alternately to the bad? Yes, but have men in real life such soundness of mind that their judgments of righteousness and wickedness must necessarily correspond with facts? Why, on this very point their verdicts conflict, and those whom some deem worthy of reward, others deem worthy of punishment. Yet granted there were one who could rightly distinguish the good and bad, yet would he be able to look into the soul's inmost constitution, as it were, if we may borrow an expression used of the body? The marvel here is not unlike that which astonishes one who does not know why in health sweet things suit some constitutions, and bitter others, or why some sick men are best alleviated by mild remedies, others by severe. But the physician who distinguishes the precise conditions and characteristics of health and sickness does not marvel. Now, the health of the soul is nothing but righteousness, and vice is its sickness. God, the guide and physician of the mind, it is who preserves the good and banishes the bad, and He looks forth from the lofty watchtower of His providence, perceives what is suited to each, and assigns what He knows to be suitable. This, then, is what that extraordinary mystery of the order of destiny comes to, that something is done by one who knows, whereat the ignorant are astonished. But let us consider a few instances, whereby appears what is the competency of human reason to fathom the divine unsearchableness. Here is one whom thou deemest the perfection of justice and scrupulous integrity. To all-knowing Providence it seems far otherwise. We all know our Lucan's admission that it was the winning cause that found favour with the gods, the beaten cause with Cato. So, shouldst thou see anything in this world happening differently from thy expectation, doubt not but events are rightly ordered. It is in thy judgment that there is perverse confusion. Grant, however, there be somewhere found one of so happy a character that God and man alike agree in their judgments about him. Yet is he somewhat infirm in strength of mind. It may be, if he fall into adversity, he will cease to practise that innocency which has failed to secure his fortune. Therefore God's wise dispensation spares him whom adversity might make worse, will not let him suffer who is ill fitted for endurance. Another there is perfect in all virtue, so holy and nigh to God, that Providence judges it unlawful that aught untoward should befall him, nay, doth not even permit him to be afflicted with bodily disease, as one more excellent than I hath said, the very body of the holy saint is built of purest ether. Often it happens that the governance is given to the good, that a restraint may be put upon superfluity of wickedness. To others Providence assigns some mixed lot suited to their spiritual nature. Some it will plague, lest they grow rank through long prosperity. Others it will suffer to be vexed with sore afflictions, to confirm their virtues by the exercise and practice of patience. Some fear overmuch what they have strength to bear, Others despise overmuch that to which their strength is unequal, and these it brings to the test of their true self through misfortune. Some also have bought a name revered to future ages at the price of a glorious death. Some by invincible constancy under their sufferings have afforded an example to others that virtue cannot be overcome by calamity. All which things, without doubt, come to pass rightly and in due order, and to the benefit of those to whom they are seen to happen. As to the other side of the marvel, that the bad now meet with affliction, now get their heart's desire, this too springs from the same causes. As to the afflictions, of course no one marvels, because all hold the wicked to be ill deserving. The truth is, their punishments both frighten others from crime, and amend those on whom they are inflicted, while their prosperity is a powerful sermon to the good, what judgments they ought to pass on good fortune of this kind, which often attends the wicked so assiduously. There is another object which may, I believe, be attained in such cases. There is one, perhaps, whose nature is so reckless and violent that poverty would drive him more desperately into crime. His disorder Providence relieves by allowing him to amass money. Such a one, in the uneasiness of a conscience stained with guilt, while he contrasts his character with his fortune, perchance grows alarmed, lest he should come to mourn the loss of that whose possession is so pleasant to him. He will then reform his ways, and through the fear of losing his fortune he forsakes his iniquity. Some, through a prosperity unworthily borne, have been hurled headlong to ruin. To some the power of the sword has been committed, to the end that the good may be tried by discipline, and the bad punished. For while there can be no peace between the righteous and the wicked, neither can the wicked agree among themselves. How should they, when each is at variance with himself, because his vices rend his conscience, and ofttimes they do things which, when they are done, they judge ought not to have been done. Hence it is that this supreme providence brings to pass this notable marvel, that the bad make the bad good. For some, when they see the injustice which they themselves suffer at the hands of evil doers, are inflamed with detestation of the offenders, and in the endeavour to be unlike those whom they hate, return to the ways of virtue. It is the divine power alone to which things evil are also good, in that by putting them to suitable use it bringeth them in the end to some good issue. For order in some way other embraceth all things, so that even that which has departed from the appointed laws of the order nevertheless falleth within an order, though another order, that nothing in the realm of providence may be left to haphazard, but hard were the task as a God to recount all, nothing omitting. Nor truly is it lawful for man to compass in thought all the mechanism of the divine work, or set it forth in speech. Let us be content to have apprehended this only, that God, the Creator of universal nature, likewise disposeth all things and guides them to good, and while he studies to preserve in likeness to himself all that he has created, he banishes all evil from the borders of his commonweal through the links of fatal necessity, whereby it comes to pass that, if thou look to disposing providence, thou wilt nowhere find the evils which are believed so to abound on earth. But I see thou hast long been burdened with the weight of the subject, and fatigued with the prolixity of the argument, and now lookest for some refreshment of sweet poesy. Listen then, and may the draught so restore thee that thou wilt bend thy mind more resolutely to what remains. Song 6. The Universal Aim. Wouldst thou, with unclouded mind, view the laws by God designed, lift thy steadfast gaze on high to the starry canopy. See in rightful league of love all the constellations move. Fiery Sol, in full career, ne'er obstructs cold Phoebe's sphere. When the Bear at heaven's height wheels his courser's rapid flight, though he sees the starry train sinking in the western main, he repines not nor desires in the flood to quench his fires. In true sequence as decreed, daily morn and eve succeed. Vesper brings the shades of night, Lucifer the morning light. Love in alternation due still the cycle doth renew, and discordant strife is driven from the starry realm of heaven. Thus in wondrous amity warring elements agree, hot and cold and moist and dry lay their ancient quarrel by. High the flickering flame ascends, downward earth for ever tends. So the year in spring's mild hours loads the air with scent of flowers. Summer paints the golden grain, then when autumn comes again, bright with fruit the orchards glow. Winter brings the rain and snow. Thus the seasons' fixed progression, tempered in a due succession, nourishes and brings to birth all that lives and breathes on earth. Then soon run life's little day, all it brought it takes away. But one sits and guides the reins, he who made and all sustains, King and Lord and Fountainhead, Judge most holy, Law most dread. Now impels and now keeps back, holds each waverer in the track. Else, where once the power withheld, that the circling spheres compelled, in their orbits to revolve, this world's order must dissolve, and the harmonious whole would all in one hideous ruin fall. But through this connected frame runs one universal aim, towards the good do all things tend, many paths, but one the end, for nought lasts unless it turns backwards in its course and yearns to that source to flow again, whence its being first was ta'en. End of section 6.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius, Manlius, Severinus, Boethius. Translated by H.R. James. Book 4, Good and Ill Fortune. Song 7, The Hero's Path, and Section 35. 7. Dost thou then see the consequence of all that we have said? Nay, what consequence? That absolutely every fortune is good fortune. And how can that be? Said I. Attend, said she, since every fortune, welcome and unwelcome alike, has for its object the reward or trial of the good, and the punishing or mending of the bad. Every fortune must be good, since it is either just or useful. The reasoning is exceeding true, said I. The conclusion, so long as I reflect upon the providence and fate of which thou hast taught me, based on a strong foundation. Yet, with thy leave, we will count it among those which just now thou didst set down as paradoxical. Why so? Said she. Because ordinary speech is apt to assert, and that frequently, that some men's fortune is bad. Shall we then for a while approach more nearly to the language of the vulgar, that we may not seem to have departed too far from the usages of men? At thy good pleasure, said I. That which advantageth thou callest good, dost thou not? Certainly. And that which either tries or amends advantageth? Granted. Is good then? Of course. Well, this is their case who have attained virtue and wage war with adversity, or turn from vice and lay hold on the path of virtue. I cannot deny it. What of the good fortune which is given as reward of the good? Do the vulgar adjudge it bad? Anything but that. They deem it to be the best, as indeed it is. What then of that which remains, which though it is harsh, puts the restraint of just punishment on the bad? Does popular opinion deem it good? Nay, of all that can be imagined, it is counted the most miserable. Observe, then, if, in following popular opinion, we have not ended in a conclusion quite paradoxical. How so? Said I. Why, it results from our admissions that of all who have attained or are advancing in or are aiming at virtue, the fortune is in every case good, while for those who remain in their wickedness, fortune is always utterly bad. It is true, said I, yet no one dare acknowledge it. Wherefore, said she, the wise man ought not to take it ill if ever he is involved in one of fortune's conflicts, any more than it becomes a brave soldier to be offended when at any time the trumpet sounds for battle. The time of trial is the express opportunity for the one to win glory, for the other to perfect his wisdom. Hence, indeed, virtue gets its name, because, relying on its own efficacy, it yieldeth not to adversity. And ye who have taken your stand on virtue's steep ascent, it is not for you to be dissolved in delights or enfeebled by pleasure, ye close in conflict. Yea, in conflict most sharp, with all fortune's vicissitudes, lest ye suffer foul fortune to overwhelm, or fair fortune to corrupt you. Hold the mean with all your strength. Whatever falls short of this, or goes beyond, is fraught with scorn of happiness, and misses the reward of toil. It rests with you to make your fortune what you will. Verily, every harsh-seeming fortune, unless it either disciplines or amends, is punishment. Song 7. The Hero's Path. 10 years of tedious warfare raged, ere Ilium's smoking ruins paid, for wedlock stained and faith betrayed, great Atrides' wrath assuaged. But when heaven's anger asked a life, and baffling winds his course withstood, the king put off his fatherhood, and slew his child with priestly knife. When by the cavern's glimmering light his comrades dear Odysseus saw, in the huge Cyclops' hideous maw, engulfed he wept the piteous sight, but blinded soon and wild with pain, and bitter tears and sore annoy, for that foul feast's unholy joy, grim Polyphemus paid again. His labors for Alcides win, a name of glory far and wide, he tamed the centaur's haughty pride, and from the lion reft his skin. The foul birds with sure darts he slew, the golden fruit he stole in vain, the dragon's watch with triple chain, from hell's depths Cerberus he drew. With their lord's own flesh he fed, the wild steed's hydra overcame, with fire, neath his own waves in shame. Maimed Achilles hid his head, huge Cacus for his crimes was slain, on Libya's sands Antaeus hurled, the shoulders that upheld the world. The great boar's dribbled spume did stain, last toil of all his might sustained, the ball of heaven, nor did he bend, beneath his toil his labor's end. The prize of heaven's high glory gained, brave hearts press on, lo heavenward lead, these bright examples from the fight, turn not your backs in coward flight, earth's conflict won, the stars your meed. End of Song The Hero's Path in section 35.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Andrew Miller, Toronto, June 2006. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius, Manlius, Severinus, Boethius. Translated by H.R. James. Book 5. Free Will and God's Foreknowledge. Section 1 and Song 1. Chants. She ceased, and was about to pass on in her discourse to the exposition of other matters, when I break in and say, Excellent is thine exhortation, and such as well beseemeth thy high authority. But I am even now experiencing one of the many difficulties which, as thou saidst but now, beset the question of providence. I want to know whether thou deemest that there is any such thing as chance at all, and, if so, what it is. Then she made answer, I am anxious to fulfill my promise completely, and open to thee a way of return to thy native land. As for these matters, though very useful to know, they are yet a little removed from the path of our design, and I fear lest digressions should fatigue thee, and thou shouldst find thyself unequal to completing the direct journey to our goal." "Have no fear for that," said I. "It is rest to me to learn, where learning brings delight so exquisite, especially when thy argument has been built up on all sides with undoubted conviction, and no place is left for uncertainty in what follows." She made answer, "I will accede to thy request." And forthwith she thus began, "If chance be defined as a result produced by random movement, without any link of causal connection, I roundly affirm that there is no such thing as chance at all, and consider the word to be altogether without meaning, except as a symbol of the thing designated. What place can be left for random action when God constraineth all things to order? For ex nihilo nihil is sound doctrine which none of the ancients gainsaid, although they used it of material substance, not of the efficient principle. This they laid down as a kind of basis for all their reasonings concerning nature. Now, if a thing arise without causes, it will appear to have arisen from nothing. But if this cannot be, neither is it possible for there to be chance in accordance with the definition just given." "Well," said I, "is there, then, nothing which can properly be called chance or accident? Or is there something to which these names are appropriate, though its nature is dark to the vulgar?" "Our good Aristotle," says she, "has defined it concisely in his Physics, and closely in accordance with the truth." "How, pray?" said I. "Thus," says she, "whenever something is done for the sake of a particular end, and for certain reasons some other result than that designed ensues, this is called chance. For instance, if a man is digging the earth for tillage, and finds a mass of buried gold. Now, such a find is regarded as accidental. Yet it is not ex nihilo, for it has its proper causes, the unforeseen and unexpected concurrence of which has brought the chance about. For had not the cultivator been digging, had not the man who hid the money buried it in that precise spot, the gold would not have been found. These, then, are the reasons why the find is a chance one, in that it results from causes which met together and concurred, not from any intention on the part of the discoverer. Since neither he who buried the gold nor he who worked in the field intended that the money should be found, but, as I said, it happened by coincidence that one dug where the other buried the treasure. We may, then, define chance as being an unexpected result flowing from a concurrence of causes where the several factors had some definite end. But the meeting and concurrence of these causes arises from that inevitable chain of order which, flowing from the fountainhead of Providence, disposes all things in their due time and place. Song 1. Chance. In the rugged Persian highlands, where the masters of the bow skill to feign a flight, and, fleeing, hurl their darts and pierce the foe, there the Tigris and Euphrates at one source their waters blend, soon to draw apart and plainward each its separate way to wend. When once more their waters mingle in a channel, deep and wide, all the flotsam comes together that is borne upon the tide. Ships and trunks of trees uprooted in the torrent's wild career meet as mid the swirling waters chance their random way may steer. Yet the shelving of the channel and the flowing water's force guides each movement and determines every floating fragment's course. Thus, where'er the drift of hazard seems most unrestrained to flow, chance herself is reined and bitted, and the curb of law doth know. End of Book 5. Free Will and God's Foreknowledge. Section 1 and Song 1. Chance.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius, translated by H.R. James. Book 5, Free Will and God's Foreknowledge, Section 2 and Song 2, The True Son. I am following needfully, said I, and I agree that it is as thou sayest. But in this series of linked causes, is there any freedom left to our will? Or does the chain of fate bind also the very motions of our souls? There is freedom, said she, nor indeed can any creature be rational, unless he be endowed with free will. For that which hath the natural use of reason has the faculty of discriminative judgment, and of itself distinguishes what is to be shunned or desired. Now, everyone seeks what he judges desirable, and avoid what he thinks should be shunned. Wherefore, beings endowed with reason possess also the faculty of free choice and refusal. But I suppose this faculty not equal alike in all. The higher divine essences possess a clear-sighted judgment, an uncorrupt will, and an effective power of accomplishing their wishes. Human souls must needs be comparatively free while they abide in contemplation of the divine mind, less free when they pass into bodily form, and still less, again, when they are enwrapped in earthly members. But when they give over to vices, and fall from possession of their proper reason, then indeed their condition is utter slavery. For when they let their gaze fall from the light of highest truth to the lower world where darkness reigns, soon ignorance blinds their vision. They are disturbed by baneful affections, by yielding and assenting to which they help to promote the slavery in which they are involved, and are in a manner led captive by reason of their very liberty. Yet he who seeth all things from eternity beholdeth these things with the eyes of his providence, and assigneth to each what is predestined for it by its merits. All things surveyed, all things overheard. Homer with mellifluous tongue Phoebus' glorious light hath sung, hymning high his praise, yet his feeble rays ocean's hollows may not brighten, nor the earth's central gloom enlighten. But the might of him who skilled this glorious universe to build is not thus confined, not earth's solid rind, nor night's blackest canopy baffle his all-seeing eye. All that is, hath been, shall be, in one glance's compass he, and, save his, no eyes all the world survey, no none. Him then truly name the Son. End of Book 5, Free Will and God's Foreknowledge, Section 2 and Song 2, The True Son.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Stan Still, West Orange, New Jersey. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius, Manlius, Severinus, Boethius. Translation by H.R. James. Book 5. Free Will and God's Foreknowledge. Section 3 and Song 3, Truth's Paradoxes. Then said I, but now I am once more perplexed by a problem yet more difficult. And what is that? Said she. Yet in truth I can guess what it is that troubles you. It seems, said I, too much of a paradox and a contradiction that God should know all things, and yet there should be free will. For if God sees everything, and can in no wise be deceived, that which Providence foresees to be about to happen must necessarily come to pass. Wherefore, if from eternity he foreknows not only what men will do, but also their designs and purposes, there can be no freedom of the will, seeing that nothing can be done, nor can any sort of purpose be entertained, save such as a divine providence, incapable of being deceived, has perceived beforehand. For if the issues can be turned aside to some other end than that foreseen by Providence, there will not then be any sure foreknowledge of the future, but uncertain conjecture instead, and to think this of God I deem impiety. Moreover, I do not approve the reasoning by which some think to solve this puzzle. For they say that it is not because God has foreseen the coming of an event that therefore it is sure to come to pass, but conversely, because something is about to come to pass, it cannot be hidden from divine providence, and accordingly the necessity passes to the opposite side, and it is not what is foreseen must necessarily come to pass, but what is about to come to pass must necessarily be foreseen. But this is just as if the matter in debate were, which is cause and which effect? Whether foreknowledge of the future cause of the necessity, or the necessity of the future of the foreknowledge. But we need not be at pains at demonstrating that, whatsoever be the order of the causal sequence, the occurrence of things foreseen is necessary, even though the foreknowledge of future events does not in itself impose upon them the necessity of their occurrence. For example, if a man be seated, the supposition of his being seated is necessarily true, and conversely, if the supposition of his being seated is true, because he really is seated, then he must necessarily be sitting. So in either case, there is some necessity involved. In this latter case, the necessity of the fact. In the former, the necessity of the truth of the statement. But in both cases, the sitter is not therefore seated because the opinion is true, but rather the opinion is true because antecedently he was sitting as a matter of fact. Thus, though the cause of the truth of the opinion comes from the other side, footnote, that is, the necessity of the truth of the statement from the fact, end footnote, yet there is a necessity on both sides alike. We can obviously reason similarly in the case of providence and the future. Even if future events are foreseen because they are about to happen, and do not come to pass because they are foreseen, still, all the same, there is a necessity, both that they should be foreseen by God as about to come to pass, and that when they are foreseen they should happen, and this is sufficient for the destruction of free will. However, it is preposterous to speak of the occurrence of events in time as the cause of eternal foreknowledge. And yet if we believe that God foresees future events because they are about to come to pass, what is it but to think that the occurrence of events is the cause of his supreme providence? Further, just as when I know anything is, that thing necessarily is, so when I know that anything will be, it will necessarily be. It follows, then, that things foreknown come to pass inevitably. Lastly, to think of a thing as being in any way other than what it is not only not knowledge, but it is false opinion widely different from the truth of knowledge. Consequently, if anything is about to be, and yet its occurrence is not certain and necessary, how can anyone foreknow that it will occur? For just as knowledge itself is free from all admixture of falsity, so any conception drawn from knowledge cannot be other than as it is conceived. For this indeed is the cause why knowledge is free from all falsehood, because of necessity each thing must correspond exactly with the knowledge which grasps its nature. In what way, then, are we to suppose that God foreknows these uncertainties as about to come to pass? For if he thinks of events which possibly may not happen at all as inevitably destined to come to pass, he is deceived. And this is not only impious to believe, but even so much as to express in words. If, on the other hand, he sees them in the future as they are in such a sense as to know that they may equally come to pass or not, what sort of foreknowledge is this, which comprehends nothing certain nor fixed? What better is this than the absurd vaticinations of Tiresias? Whate'er I say shall either come to pass or not. In that case, too, in what would divine providence surpass human opinion if it holds for uncertain things the occurrence of which is uncertain, even as men do? But if at that perfectly sure fountainhead of all things no shadow of uncertainty can possibly be found, then the occurrence of those things which he has surely foreknown as coming is certain. Wherefore there can be no freedom in human actions and designs, but the divine mind, which foresees all things without possibility of mistake, ties and binds them down to one only issue. But this admission, once made, what an upset of human affairs manifestly ensues! Vainly are rewards and punishments proposed for the good and bad, since no free voluntary motion of the will has deserved either one or the other. Nay, punishment of the wicked and reward of the righteous, which is now esteemed the perfection of justice, will seem the most flagrant injustice, since men are determined either way, not by their own proper volition, but by the necessity of what must surely be. And therefore neither virtue nor vice is anything, but rather good and ill desert are confounded together without distinction. Moreover, seeing the whole course of events is deduced from Providence, and nothing is left to free human design, it comes to pass that our vices are also referred to the author of all good, a thought than which none more abominable can possibly be conceived. Again, no ground is left for hope or prayer, since how can we hope for blessings, or pray for mercy, when every object of desire depends upon the links of an unalterable chain of causation? Gone, then, is the one means of intercourse between God and man, the communion of hope and prayer, if it be true that we ever earn the inestimable recompense of a divine favor at the price of a due humility. For this is the one way whereby men seem able to hold communion with God, and are joined to that unapproachable light by the very act of supplication, even before they obtain their petitions. Then, since these things can scarcely be believed to have any efficacy, if the necessity of future events be admitted, what means will there be whereby we may be brought near and cleave to him who is the supreme head of all? Wherefore it needs must be that the human race, even as thou didst erstwhile declare in song, parted and dissevered from its source, should fall to ruin. Song 3. Truth's Paradoxes. Why does a strange discordance break the ordered scheme's fair harmony? Hath God decreed 'twixt truth and truth there may such lasting warfare be, that truths, each severally plain, we strive to reconcile in vain? Or is discord not in truth, since truth is self-consistent ever, but close in fleshly wrappings held? The blindest mind of man can never discern, so faint her taper shines, the subtle chain that all combines. Ah, then why burns man's restless mind, truth's hidden portals to unclose? Knows he already what he seeks? Why toil to seek it if he knows? Yet haply if he knoweth not, why blindly seek he knows not what? Who for a good he knows not sighs, who can an unknown end pursue? How find, how e'en when haply found, hail that strange form he never knew? Or is that man's inmost soul once knew each part and knew the whole, now though by fleshly vapors dimmed, not all forgot her visions past? For while several parts are lost, to the one whole she cleaveth fast. Whence he who yearns truth to find is neither sound of sight nor blind, for neither does he know in full, nor is he reft of knowledge quite, but holding still to what is left, he gropes in the uncertain light, and by the part that still survives, to win back all he bravely strives. End Book 5, Free Will and God's Foreknowledge, Section 3 and Song 3, Truth's Paradoxes.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by M.L. Cohen, Cleveland, Ohio, March 2007. The Consolation of Philosophy by Anicius, Manlius, Severinus, Boethius. Translated by H.R. James. Book 5, Free Will and God's Foreknowledge. Section 4, A Psychological Fallacy. Then said she, "This debate about providence is an old one, and is vigorously discussed by Cicero in his Divination. Thou also hast long and earnestly pondered the problem, yet no one has had diligence and perseverance enough to find a solution. And the reason of this obscurity is that the movement of human reasoning cannot cope with the simplicity of the divine foreknowledge. For if a conception of its nature could in any wise be framed, no shadow of uncertainty would remain. With a view of making this at last clear and plain, I will begin by considering the arguments by which thou art swayed. First, I inquire into the reasons why thou art dissatisfied with the solution proposed, which is to the effect that, seeing the fact of foreknowledge is not thought the cause of necessity of future events, foreknowledge is not to be deemed any hindrance to the freedom of the will. Now, surely the sole ground on which thou arguest the necessity of the future is that things which are foreknown cannot fail to come to pass. But if, as thou wert ready to acknowledge just now, the fact of foreknowledge imposes no necessity on things future, what reason is there for supposing the results of voluntary action constrained to a fixed issue? Suppose, for the sake of argument, and to see what follows, we assume that there is no foreknowledge. Are willed actions, then, tied down to any necessity in this case? Certainly not. Let us assume foreknowledge again, but without its involving any actual necessity. The freedom of the will, I imagine, will remain in complete integrity. But thou wilt say that, even though all the foreknowledge is not the necessity of the future event's occurrence, yet it is a sign that will necessarily happen. Granted. But in this case it is plain that, even if there had been no foreknowledge, the issues would have been inevitably certain. For a sign only indicates something which is, does not bring to pass that of which it is the sign. We require to show beforehand that all things, without exception, happen of necessity, in order that a preconception must be a sign of this necessity. Otherwise, if there is no such universal necessity, neither can any preconception be a sign of a necessity which exists not. Manifestly, too, a proof exhibited on firm grounds of reason must be drawn not from signs and loose general arguments, but from suitable and necessary causes. But how can it be that things foreseen should ever fail to come to pass? Why, this is suppose us to believe that the events which Providence foresees to be coming were not about to happen, instead of our supposing that, although they should come to pass, yet there was no necessity involved in their own nature compelling their occurrence. Take an illustration that will help convey my meaning. There are many things which we see taking place before our eyes, the movements of charioteers, for instance, in guiding and turning their cars and so on. Now, is any one of these movements compelled by any necessity? No, certainly not. There would be no efficacy and skill if all motions took place perforce. Then, things which in taking place are free from any necessity as to their being in the present must also, before they take place, be about to happen without necessity. Wherefore there are things which will come to pass, the occurrence of which is perfectly free from necessity. At all events, I imagine that no one will deny that things now taking place were about to come to pass before they were actually happening. Such things, however much foreknown, are in their occurrence free. For even as knowledge of things present imports no necessity into things that are taking place, so foreknowledge of the future imports none into things that are about to come. But this, thou wilt say, is the very point in dispute, whether any foreknowing is possible of things whose occurrence is not necessary. For here there seems to thee a contradiction, and, If they are foreseen, their necessity follows, where if there is no necessity, they can by no means be foreknown. And thou thinkest that nothing can be grasped as known unless it is certain. But if things whose occurrence is uncertain are foreknown as certain, this is the very mist of opinion, not the truth of knowledge. For to think of things otherwise than they are, thou believest to be incompatible with the soundness of knowledge. Now the cause of the mistake is this, that men think that all knowledge is cognized purely by the nature and efficacy of the thing known. Whereas the case is the very reverse. All that is known is grasped not conformably to its own efficacy, but rather conformably to the faculty of the knower. An example will make this clear. The roundness of a body is recognized in one way by sight, in another by touch. Sight looks upon it from a distance as a whole by a simultaneous reflection of rays. Touch grasps the roundness piecemeal, by contact and attachment to the surface, and by actual movement round the periphery itself. Man himself, likewise, is viewed in one way by sense, in another by imagination, in another way again by thought, in another by pure intelligence. Sense judges figure clothed in material substance. Imagination, figure alone without matter. Thought transcends this again, and by its contemplation of universals considers the type itself which is contained in an individual. The eye of intelligence is yet more exalted, for overpassing the sphere of the universal, it will behold absolute form itself by the pure force of the mind's vision. Wherein the main point to be considered is this: the higher faculty of comprehension embraces the lower, while the lower cannot rise to the higher. For sense has no efficacy beyond matter, nor can imagination behold universal ideas, nor thought embrace pure form. But intelligence, looking down, as it were, from its higher standpoint in its intuition of form, discriminates also the several elements which underlie it, but it comprehends them in the same way as it comprehends that form itself, which could be cognized by no other than itself. For it cognizes the universal of thought, the figure of imagination, and the matter of sense, without employing thought, imagination, or sense, but surveying all things, so to speak, under the aspect of pure form by a single flash of intuition. Thought also, in considering the universal, embraces images and sense impressions without resorting to imagination or sense. For it is thought which has thus defined the universal from its conceptual point of view. Man is a two-legged animal endowed with reason. This is indeed a universal notion, yet no one is ignorant that the thing is imaginable and presentable to sense, because thought considers it not by imagination or sense, but by means of rational conception. Imagination, too, through its faculty of viewing and forming representations, is founded upon the senses, nevertheless surveys sense impressions without calling in sense, not in the way of sense perception, but of imagination. Seest thou then how all things in cognizing use rather their own faculty than the faculty of the things which they cognize? Nor is this strange, for since every judgment is the act of the judge, it is necessary that each should accomplish its task by his own, not by another's power. Song 4. A Psychological Fallacy. From the porch's murky depths comes a doctrine sage, that doth liken living mind to a written page. Since all knowledge comes through sense, graven by experience, as say they, the pen it marks curiously doth trace on the smooth unsullied white of the paper's face, so do outer things impress images on consciousness. But if verily the mind thus all passive lies, if no living power within its own force supplies, if it but reflect again like a glass things false and vain, whence thy wondrous faculty that perceives and knows that in one fair ordered scheme doth the world dispose, grasp each whole that sense presents, or break into elements, so divides and recombines, and in changeful wise now to low descends, and now to the heights doth rise. Last in inward swift review, strictly sifts the false and true. Of these ample potencies, fitter cause, I ween, were mind's self than marks impressed by the outer scene. Yet the body through the sense stirs the soul's intelligence. When light flashes on the eye, or sound strikes the ear, mind aroused to due response makes the message clear, and the dumb external signs with the hidden foreign combines. End of Book 5, Free Will and God's Foreknowledge, Section 4, A Psychological Fallacy.
Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius, translated by H.R. James. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. The Consolation of Philosophy, Book 5, Section 5 and Song 5, The Upward Look. Now, although in the case of bodies endowed with sentiency, the qualities of external objects affect the sense organs, and the activity of mind is preceded by a bodily affection which calls forth the mind's action upon itself, and stimulates the forms till that moment lying inactive within, yet, I say, if in these bodies endowed with sentiency the mind is not inscribed by mere passive affection, but of its own efficacy discriminates the impressions furnished to the body, how much more do intelligences free from all bodily affections employ in their discrimination their own mental activities, instead of conforming to external objects? So on these principles various modes of cognition belong to distinct and different substances. For to creatures void of motive power, shellfish and other such creatures which cling to rocks and grow there, belongs sense alone, void of all other modes of gaining knowledge. To beasts endowed with movement, in whom some capacity of seeking and shunning seems to have arisen, imagination also. Thought pertains only to the human race, as intelligence to divinity alone. Hence it follows that that form of knowledge exceeds the rest, which of its own nature cognizes not only its proper object, but the objects of the other forms of knowledge also. But what if sense and imagination were to gainsay thought, and declare that universal which thought deems itself to behold to be nothing? For the object of sense and imagination cannot be universal, so that either the judgment of reason is true and there is no sense object, or, since they know full well that many objects are presented to sense and imagination, the conception of reason, which looks on that which is perceived by sense and particular as if it were a something universal, is empty of content. Suppose, further, that reason maintains in reply that it does indeed contemplate the object of both sense and imagination under the form of universality, while sense and imagination cannot aspire to the knowledge of the universal, since their cognizance cannot go beyond bodily figures, and that in the cognition of reality we ought rather to trust the stronger and more perfect faculty of judgment. In a dispute of this sort, should not we, in whom is planted the faculty of reasoning as well as of imagining and perceiving, espouse the cause of reason? In like manner is it that human reason thinks that divine intelligence cannot see the future, except after the fashion in which its own knowledge is obtained. For thy contention is, if events do not appear to involve certain and necessary issues, they cannot be foreseen as certainly about to come to pass. There is, then, no foreknowledge of such events, or, if we can ever bring ourselves to believe that there is, there can be nothing which does not happen of necessity. If, however, we could have some part in the judgment of the divine mind, even as we participate in reason, we should think it perfectly just that human reason should submit itself to the divine mind, no less than we judge that imagination and sense ought to yield to reason. Wherefore, let us soar, if we can, to the heights of that supreme intelligence, for there reason will see what in itself it cannot look upon, and that is in what way things whose occurrence is not certain may yet be seen in a sure and definite foreknowledge, and that this foreknowledge is not conjecture, but rather knowledge in its supreme simplicity, free of all limits and restrictions. In what diverse shapes and fashions do the creatures great and small over wide earth's teeming surface skim, or scud, or walk, or crawl? Some with elongated body sweep the ground, and as they move, trail perforce with writhing belly in the dust a sinuous groove. Some on light wing upward soaring swiftly do the winds divide, and through heaven's ample spaces in free motion smoothly glide. These earth's solid surface pressing, with firm paces onward rove, ranging through the verdant meadows, crouching in the woodland grove. Great and wondrous is their variance, yet in all the head low bent dulls the soul and blunts the senses, though their forms be different. Man alone, erect, aspiring, lifts his forehead to the skies, and in upright posture steadfast seems earth's baseness to despise. If with earth not all besotted, to this parable give ear. Thou whose gaze is fixed on heaven, who thy face on high dost rear, lift thy soul too heavenward, haply lest it stain its heavenly worth, and thine eyes alone look upward, while thy mind cleaves to the earth. End of section 5 and song 5.